Do you know about Boston Sand and Gravel? Chances are you've passed it once or twice on I-93. But did you know that the often overlooked building is one of the most important industries in our city? Come along as we learn how the railroad ties everything together and is responsible for bringing crucial materials for concrete production straight to downtown Boston. Boston Sand and Gravel has a handful of subsidiaries, much of which aid their concrete production and distribution efforts. These wholly owned subsidiaries allow for the company to have a broader reach over the New England region. Like Manchester Sand and Gravel in Hooksett, New Hampshire, this industry is responsible for gathering and distributing gravel to the local area and Boston Sand and Gravel's Charlestown site. Trucks ship gravel from this subsidiary right down I-93. The other major natural ingredients for producing concrete are sand and water. I'll be honest, I'm not totally sure where the water comes from. I would think it could be tap or well water. But the sand provides us with a very interesting story. Boston Sand and Gravel has its very own railroad. The New Hampshire North Coast, or NHN, is a Class 3 railroad used to carry sand from subsidiary Ossipee Aggregates to Boston Sand and Gravel. This morning, I have been busy chasing NHN D7 from Dover, New Hampshire all the way up to Ossipee. Here's a quick rundown on how the NHN operation works. It's best thought of as a cycle. Starting on Monday afternoon, a crew using the symbol D8 takes sand loads from Ossipee Aggregates, or the pit, to Dover Yard on CSX territory. Later that same night, a CSX crew using the symbol L065 takes the loaded sand cars into the city. Majority of the time, they follow the route of Amtrak's Downeaster into Boston. Every now and then, they will take the Haverhill line via Reading instead. Once they arrive in the city, they spot the loads and take out the previous trip's empties back to Dover, using the same symbol. After arriving in Dover in the early morning, the consist sits until an NHN crew using the symbol D7 takes the empties back to Ossipee. When they get to Ossipee, they drop the empties in the pit for them to get loaded and taken into Boston by D8 later in the day. This operation happens Monday to Thursday, but lately has only been operating into the city on Monday and Wednesday nights. I am here at the pit on the sunny day of August 13th, 2024. I have just spent the morning chasing D7 from Dover Yard. Looking east, we see a large grade, the final stretch of track leading up to the pit. The road to the right is used by NHN employees to access their locomotive shops and servicing area. D7 will now drop off these empties for loading and grab a cut of loads for Rochester's Sand and Gravel. We'll get to what that is later. Right now, D8 is spotting the Rochester loads, which it will soon take out of the pit and down to a siding near the locomotive shop. With the train crew taking a lunch break at the engine shop, I decided to get some food for myself. Ossipee House of Pizza came through. Their mini 9-inch cheese pizza was just $9, and boy was it good. After that pizza, I needed to cool off. With the temperature being a scorching 90 degrees, I thought it'd be nice to take a dip at one of Ossipee's lakes. On my way to Lake Duncan, I missed the turn and found myself at yet another sand pit. There are numerous other sand and gravel companies in town, whose products are locally shipped. I quickly turned around and found the lake. It was a nice reset. Back at the pit, D8 has just arrived. Right now, they are grabbing their loads for Boston and waiting for the final cars to be filled with sand. In the meantime, the crew must grab their paperwork from the office and have a job briefing before jetting off towards Dover. The locomotives will also be refueled on the fueling track. Sand mining in this location began in the 1960s. Yet the loading process for train cars remains simple. Ossipee Aggregates uses a front loader. And now begins the fun part, following this train all the way into Boston. Browns Ridge Road is the first crossing east of Route 16 on the Conway branch. At this moment, D8 is grabbing those 9 cars we saw them take out of the pit this morning. They will be headed to a point known as Tri-City, where they will serve Rochester's sand and gravel. If you listen carefully, you can hear the engines roaring up the hill in the distance. These New Hampshire grades are the real deal. This train is traveling on the former Boston and Maine Railroad Conway branch. Looking back at the engine shop, notice how a line appears to continue northbound. That is the Conway branch right-of-way, which travels all the way up to Conway, New Hampshire. The portion between Conway and Ossipee is abandoned. Not much remains of the right-of-way either. It's places like the old station in downtown Ossipee that remind us of this line's past dominance. Sand from this very pit has been shipped into Boston for generations. Before the New Hampshire North Coast, the Boston and Maine was responsible for transporting this sand into the city. When the Boston and Maine went belly up in 1983, they made an attempt to abandon the Conway branch. In 1986, Boston Sand and Gravel would purchase the line from the Boston and Maine up until Ossipee, upgrading it to Class 3 railroad standards, and ultimately saving it from abandonment. With an estimated 30 years of supply left in the pit, NHN shouldn't be going anywhere anytime soon. Each time NHN runs a train into Boston, which usually carries about 10 to 20 carloads, an estimated 30 to 50 trucks are taken off the road. NHN's locomotive fleet is bigger than these two GP38-2s. 3825, the sister of the 3823, is a GP38-2 frequently used on road service. NHN also has two of their very own high-hood GP18 locomotives. 1801, formerly Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad 1341, was acquired by NHN from the New England Central Railroad. 1802, whom NHN bought from the 470 Railroad Club, who bought it from the MBTA, was formerly Grand Trunk Railroad 4952. 4952 would then spend some years on the SEMTA, Detroit's short-lived commuter rail, before being purchased by the MBTA and turned into number 904. Here is D8 making its first and only stop of today's trip. Located at Tri-City is Eastern Propane and the Rochester Sand and Gravel site, another subsidiary. The rest of the cars on this consist are for Boston. This isn't always the case, though. NHN serves multiple non-aggregate industries, including Eastern Propane, as I mentioned, and one unnamed industry in Rollinsford. For today's D8, it's a straight shot to Dover after their work at Tri-City. I intercepted them next at Dover Yard, their final stop of the day. This is now CSX trackage, and once D8 arrives, it will tie down until a CSX crew can take it into Boston. This was really the first moment in the trip where I had time to take a look at my car. Would you be surprised to see that it was covered in sand? Not me. The crew for tonight's L065 is on duty at 7 p.m. The final leg of the trip into Boston can be difficult for this train. L065 usually has to wait for MBTA and Amtrak moves as it gets close to the city. This evening, the dispatcher has L065 following Amtrak 688 into Massachusetts and an MBTA inbound into Boston. We are stationed just south of the New Hampshire-Massachusetts border in Bradford. Things get especially hard for L065 around Vale interlocking, where two tracks become one for 1.5 miles. Depending on what time they leave Dover, it can be difficult for them to get through this area without waiting for commuter traffic. At Vale interlocking is also what's known as a defect detector. The defect detector device tells L065 that they are not dragging any equipment, which is a major hazard common in freight railroading when you have such a long train. Keep an ear out for the defect detector going over the radio. The defect detector and scanner audio you are about to hear is from a day in June.
MBTA detector, milepost 22.3. Track 1, no defects. Repeat, no defects. Total axle 108 out.
NHN 3825 west, stand over one track, no defects out. CS6 L065 engine, NHN 3825 kill is Boston West, radio check out.
Boston West Airfare L065, good radio, over.
Good radio, thank you. 5 on. NHN 3825 west, clear, CBF LJ, check.
With all this talk about sand, you may be wondering, Nathan, where does the cement come from? That final, crucial product for making concrete. Well, don't worry. The source of the cement is about to pass through Ballardvale, right behind L065.
22.3. Track 1, no defects. Repeat, no defects. Total axle 28. Rebroadcast, out.
That was CSX L055, the last freight train that runs into Boston's North Terminal alongside the sand train. On tonight's L055 were 2 hoppers, filled to the brim with cement for the Ciment Quebec plant in Everett. I can only assume that once these loaded hoppers are dropped off at Ciment Quebec, Some of it is trucked over to the Boston Sand and Gravel site in Charlestown and used for their concrete production. Boston Sand and Gravel lists Ciment Quebec as one of their partners on their website. L065 rarely makes it into Boston before 11 p.m. Usually the dispatcher has them follow a Keolis inbound into town. This is a historically significant location to L065 because up until mid-2018, it would switch off of the Lowell line right here onto a remaining track from Boston and Maine Yard 8. This track was taken out and replaced by the Green Line extension. Just 50 years ago, freight trains were a very common thing in Boston. This photo was taken by Alan McMillan at the current location of East Somerville Station, which shows Yard 8 in action. The only remaining evidence of Yard 8 is the old light tower that still remains on the Lowell line's wayside. "100 miles and 9 hours later, the sand train has arrived in Boston."
5, 10 to go.
L065 will now shove its loads up Track 2 of Tower A interlocking. The sand train has major significance to Boston freight rail history. This is the last road freight left in Boston, if you can even call it that. L065 and L055 are what truly remains of Boston's once robust freight rail network. If you're interested in learning more about Boston's freight rail history, check out this video in the top right. I also have more content coming on this topic in the future. L065 unhooks from their loads and pulls back into Tower A. This is so that they can reposition the locomotives onto the other side of the consist. This scene shows the last men standing side by side, the final two freight trains that serve a smaller but functioning industrial area. From here, L065 runs up to FX interlocking under I-93 in Somerville. This footage, taken in June 2025, shows some of their switching operation. They now get permission to reverse directions and head back into the Boston Sand and Gravel yard. With no more passenger traffic to worry about for a couple of hours, L065 can use the main line as headroom for their switching operation. Made evident by I-93's viaduct looming above us, the location of Boston Sand and Gravel is quite advantageous. L065 now shoves the empties into another yard track. This operation will continue for a few more hours, until the crew is ready to head back up to Dover. Meanwhile, L055 with the Ciment Quebec hoppers should just be arriving at the Everett Industry. Once these hoppers are dropped off, they will be switched around by the Ciment Quebec Alco switcher and be siphoned of their cement. This cement will be loaded into trucks that distribute the hot commodity throughout the city. For the rest of the night, these two trains will continue shuffling cars around and delivering goods to customers. Both trains arrive in the city after sunset and leave well before sunrise. You don't hear them, and you certainly don't see them. But there is no doubt that you benefit from them. Perhaps the very foundation of your home or the sidewalk in your neighborhood is made of Boston sand and gravel concrete. When you walk around downtown Boston, take a look at a skyscraper, staircase, or Jersey barrier. Chances are that Boston sand and gravel contributed to the construction, and that it was made possible in part by a train. Hello again. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. It helps a lot. Also, in big channel news, I have just launched a merch store. I am selling Boston by Rails themed hats, t-shirts, stickers, and even more. Take a look at what there is to purchase on my channel homepage. We would love to see you sporting some of this merchandise out on the rails. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Boston sand and gravel. Comment down below what you think. See you in the next one.